Good morning and welcome to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is my twice weekly show. Elevenses. It is, if I can remember the date correctly, it is the October the 5th, isn't it? And we're on to show number 567, and I've got the wrong date on the intro. That's interesting. How did I manage to do that? Anyway, what have we got for you today? Knott's police say there has been a spike in bike thefts, which seems to me to be rather shutting the stable door after the motorcycle at least has bolted. A rider has found thieves making off with his broken down BMW. That ended up with a police chase. Heavy rental bikes have been linked to lime bike leg fractures. Damon Motorcycles, an electric promise which appears to have burned out. Suzuki, they have cut prices, they say, permanently on 6 bikes, which is a bit of an odd piece of news. We don't normally see prices being cut. Yamaha, they're bringing back the WR125R. ZF Moto 500F. It shows you the 80s retro look is back in fashion. And finally, in depth today, we'll look at the problem of global retailing and ask if that's what's killed off M&P. So grab yourselves a brew, settle yourselves down for the next 30 odd minutes as I take you through today's show. Right. Okay. So, what have we got for you so far? Well, on Wednesday, I ran a story. Let's just shrink that down. I ran a story about a motorcycle that Yamaha had patented. It seemed to use a 4-stroke engine, which did the suck, squeeze, bang, blow 4-stroke cycle thing, but without the bang, in order to endow an electric motorcycle with something of the characteristic sort of feel and sound of an ICE engine. Now, I looked at the patent application. I thought it seemed unlikely because the bike's actually shown as with a spark plug, and obviously, if you are building something that just sucks, squeezes, and doesn't bang, there's no point in having a spark plug in it. So I wonder whether this was actually a bolt-on low-power electric motor where the alternator would normally be, complete with a coupling on the end of the crank to allow the drive to be switched between power modes. So basically a hybrid. Well, over on my Facebook page, somebody did bother to run the Japanese text through Google Translate, and it does appear to be a noise-making machine that uses a non-functioning 4-stroke engine, which of course does render that spark plug completely irrelevant. Now, at least I did correctly identify the coupling. This is it, which allows the electric motor, which appears to be number 19 on this diagram, and it means that the electric motor can spin the crank through the rest of that sort of, well, I suppose 3-stroke cycle if you don't get a bang with it. Now, it's clearly not intended to be anything serious in the way of a fake ICE engine, because, apart from the fact that you've got all the weight of an actual motor that doesn't do anything, there's also that parasitic drag. The engine has to be turned over. It has to go through the compression stroke in order to compress the gas to give you the exhaust noise. So the performance of a bike like this would be that of a rather tired slug, I should think. So the entire thing, it looks like a sort of student design exercise to me. I don't think it is anything even vaguely serious. People have been saying this is what electric motorcycles have come to. You have to build in a fake ICE motor to give them some character. I think that's completely mistaken. But I really don't think we're going to see anything vaguely like the design exercise. Meanwhile, I've been something else sort of fairly meaningless. I've been working on website overhaul. And I think I've explained what happened previously. The UK based host I've been using for a number of years suddenly sold out to the US based GoDaddy, who A, don't have a great reputation, and B, banged the price up very significantly. So I shifted to another much more reasonably priced host. Now, unfortunately, this is where I discovered my big mistake. I'd actually used the previous host, easy to use, built-in editor. And of course, as soon as I tried to move the site, I discovered it was littered with code specific to the host. So rather than try to strip it all out, which would have been a job for the ages, I went back to basics and basically built a new site by hand. Now, it's not fully finished. And the bad news is that in the process, it has slipped off the front pages of Google, but clearly not so far out of sight that web designers can't find it. So I get regular emails inviting me to do some upgrades and, a consultation, and then just they'll give me some tips. And just recently, I was invited to join Leaf for a free chat and to hear how he can fix, quote, under the radar SEO and design issues. Now, usually mails like this go straight to spam, but for some reason, I decided to check out the link to snapcoreweb.com. And this is what I found. There's the home page of Snapcore Web, and it appears to be, I don't know where O+8 is, but it's an unfinished site. It's full of text snippets, boilerplate text. You can see there's some lorem ipsum text there to tell the web designers where to put their own text. The prices for all three plans that they offer are exactly the same. The links don't lead anywhere. The get started button doesn't work, and social media links don't work. The about us page is similarly unfinished, but rather amusingly, as well as Leaf not being listed on the team page, the spelling of frequently asked questions here is hilariously bad. So my guess, what are we looking at? Probably a scam. My guess is that probably they ask you for cash and then tell you to wait for your shiny new website to be delivered. Or it may even be something a bit more nefarious indeed, which actually involves handing over control of an established domain to an unknown party. Anyway, whatever, I'm not going in that general direction. So, right, on with the weather forecast. Now, I doubt any of you missed Storm Amy in the UK this last couple of days. It provisionally brought the strongest ever October wind gust of 92 miles per hour to Northern Ireland and the lowest ever October pressure reading. Now, why did it happen? Well, in effect, what happened was an ex-hurricane, Humberto, that fed warm and very moist air to the north, and that mixed with some cold air from a major low which had spun up in polar regions, and that was a potent mix which created Storm Amy. Now, I was in Bradford on Friday night, and on the way to the hotel, to and from the Opera House, it was very windy indeed. And by 10:30, when we were headed back, it was actually quite difficult to walk. The drive back to London yesterday, it was a little rough too, and I did feel for the guy on his Triumph Tiger riding southbound on the M1 in Yorkshire. He was having to cope with a seriously gusty side wind, which was moving his bike around quite a lot in the lane. Now, this morning, it sees a yellow warning for wind across northern eastern Scotland continuing before winds should ease back across the UK by afternoon. It has dropped here, it's still breezy, but it's not nearly as windy as it was. Western parts of England, Wales, Northern Ireland are seeing a mix of sun and showers, and that band of weather will actually move southeast. It will replace this sunny start in the south and east of England. A band of heavier rain will return to northwestern Scotland too. It'll also affect Cumbria by mid-afternoon, and at much the same time these showers will begin to fizzle out again across England. So temperatures range from 13 in the north to a decent 16 in the south. Now, Monday may see a few patches of mist and fog in the south as the winds drop further, but more rain will feed into northwest Scotland, where it's been very wet indeed. So I suspect there will be some flood warnings up there It'll also remain very windy up in that area. Elsewhere, a few patches of rain to affect northern areas, but the south stays dry, sunnier and calmer, temperatures in the high teens, even possibly into the low 20s. Now, Tuesday sees the rain from the northwest slowly sinking southwards. It should reach northwest Wales and central northern England by the evening, but it stays sunny around that band of rain, and in the southeast it should again be a nice day with some very mild temperatures. And longer term, the outlook right forward to next weekend actually looks calm, dry and sunny for much of the country. So if you're traveling anywhere and planning a ride out next weekend, it looks like a decent one. Right, and that takes us to the news. Now, the theft of the bike belonging to Yogesh Alakari, who you'll recall had his KTM 390 Adventure and luggage, which included his passport, cameras, and other kit, stolen in broad daylight from Woollerton Park in late August. It turned the spotlight on motorcycle theft generally in Nottinghamshire area. Now, the 33-year-old Indian overlander, he used his social media channels very effectively to spread the news of the bike going missing. And he was pretty critical of the police in the UK too. Now, not surprisingly, with that report going viral, it prompted a large police response, public appeals. And while the bike has still not been recovered to my knowledge, and I would guess it probably won't be by now, an arrest did follow in early September. But in a sort of classic bolting the stable door long after the horse has vanished over the horizon move, Nottinghamshire police are now saying that they've seen a spike in the number of moped, scooter and motorcycle thefts and attempted thefts recently, and they reported there were 4 such incidents on Tuesday evening alone. So what's the response? Well, it's the regular advice urging owners to rethink how they secure their machines. Now, their main message is a fairly sensible one, that it doesn't actually take a criminal mastermind to steal a typical motorcycle, and most opportunist theft is very quick too. One of the people arrested in connection with the incidents last week apparently was a 14-year-old boy. And the police say thieves only need a matter of seconds to steal a moped, scooter or motorcycle, especially if they are left with poor security. Crime Prevention Officer Tom Ford said, "We're urging people to take extra care and reduce their risk of becoming a victim by following our safety advice and taking steps to layer their security by using multiple methods, making it harder and less attractive to thieves." You know, basically, this is the advice that's been trotted out for a couple of decades at least. Now, I still think there are some questions to be asked about how it was that Yogesh's KTM was being seen ridden out of the park under its own power in a CCTV footage. In later statements, he claimed it had been secured with a disc lock. Now, cheap ones can be smashed easily with a blunt instrument, but it's not quite so easy to start a bike. They're usually pushed out of sight, then picked up by van. Anyway, police teams apparently have been trawling CCTV. They've been following up leads. They've even been using drone and dog teams in Nottinghamshire to make some recoveries, but they do emphasise that these simple precautions make the difference between riding away on your bike and having somebody else ride away on it. Now, the opportunist nature of a lot of bike theft was illustrated in the details that emerged at Durham Crown Court. And this is regarding an incident that happened on the A167 near Ferry Hill in County Durham. It seems that what started with a broken down motorcycle ended up in a car chase, a foot pursuit, and finally with arrests. Now, following the breakdown of his machine, the owner returned with a pickup to recover the bike, only to find 2 men in the middle of actually stealing it. Now, the court heard that the 2 suspects had been seen in the area behaving suspiciously, and as soon as the pickup pulled up, they made off with that BMW motorcycle. Now, the story is a little bit confused, but the police seem to have spotted the vehicle involved. I suspect it was promptly reported by the owner of the bike, and they deployed pursuit units. Now, these were used to block off the vehicle's access, and suspects then abandoned their vehicle and attempted to make off on foot, but they were apprehended, and in court they are facing charges of attempted theft, but also dangerous driving, resisting arrest, and potentially other related offences involving that chase. Now, on the one hand, it's good to see a strong response to with law enforcement, but the resources necessary to bring this case to court and to recover the machine for the rider, must have cost tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds for the police. So, the takeaway message really is even when a bike is disabled, security isn't optional. Right. Okay. Quick break as we just go over to the little interval while I remind you why you should like and subscribe to these shows. So let's just get that up on. As always, can I ask you to take a moment to like and subscribe to this show if you've not already done so? Every click helps other motorcyclists discover my content, or simply share the word the old-fashioned way by telling your riding buddies about Elevenses. They can watch and catch up. Remember, my latest riding skills articles are always free, and you can get all the links delivered weekly to your email inbox by subscribing to my newsletter at survivalskills.substack.com. Or you can use this QR code to jump straight to it when the show's over, of course. No spam, and if you don't like the content, unsubscribe at any time. Right, okay. Clive's looked in. Good morning. Clive says, morning from a sunny but very breezy Scotland. Yeah, I would imagine it was. It was certainly breezy in Bradford. Right, okay, so moving on swiftly, what's the next news story for us? Well, this is Lime. Lime, e-bikes, electric bicycles may not be motorcycles, but I feel it's all sort of part of the two-wheel transport scene. So I do cover what's going on with Lime and other e-rental schemes fairly recently. And Lime, of course, has been trying to tidy up their image. And they've added 900 new parking bays as part of their London action plan. And it's designed to expand their areas of access at the same time as they work to tidy up the abandoned bikes that clutter up the pavements. As an aside, there's certainly fewer bikes abandoned on the street round here, but where they have chosen to put the parking bay up is on a really, really awkward corner where you can't see around it, and suddenly there's a parking bay for bikes there. It's incredibly badly thought out, that, and I don't know how they got permission to put it there. Now, there's no denying that their bikes do play an important role in micromobility. There are apparently 4 million unique riders and tens of millions of trips recorded. But with their growth in travel, there has come a growth in injury too. Trauma surgeons in London hospitals have reported a spike in injuries linked to these heavy rental bikes. They weigh about 35 kilos, apparently. And they say that the fractures have become common enough and serious enough to have earned the nickname Lime Bike Leg. And it's raising more concerns about whether the boom in rental e-bikes has actually outpaced the safeguards. Now, Lime's boss, Wayne Ting, he says that safety is incredibly important and that every bike is checked before it goes out. And that when faults are reported, those bikes are taken offline immediately. They claim that they can now do that. They also say that 99.99% of rides are completed without incident. However, you may recall, I commented on this some months ago, a check by an independent cycle mechanic revealed bikes with faults such as damaged handlebars and bored underinflated tires and defective brakes too. And of course, riders are also under scrutiny for their behaviour. And this has forced Lime to run a Respect the Red campaign, which urges users not to ride through red traffic lights. And the company says that a new AI-powered system will actually prevent bikes being left in unsafe or overcrowded locations. We passed one abandoned on the North Circular not too long ago, but I can't see how that operates. If the rider simply gets off the bike and leaves it, I mean, does it continue to charge them or something? It can hardly move the bike under its own steam. Anyway, clinicians believe that it's essential to better share data. The operators, hospitals, the regulators themselves all need to swap this data because they think the full scale of injuries is being underestimated. Orthopedic consultant Alex Liddell of Edward the Seventh Hospital, he said that the bike's 35 kilogram weight is a significant risk factor. And he says even a minor fall can translate into a significant break. Well, I suppose if that lands on your leg, it won't do you any good at all. Right, another quick interlude. Well, I'll just have a cup of tea. If you enjoy these shows, why not become a member of my coffee pages? Just follow the QR code and sign up. As a member, you get free access to the latest articles and the Survival Schools with instant downloads of everything from free mini ebooks to book versions of my paperbacks. Become a one-off supporter and you'll open up the archive of over 1,000 articles. If you buy me a monthly cuppa as a subscriber, there's even more content to enjoy. Right, okay, so Nick's looked in as well. Good morning, Nick. Nice to see you too. We have time to move over to the next part of the show, which is where we start looking at some motorbikes. There we go. Let's get the banner up for that. Now, as you'll recall from the last show, Damon is an e-moto startup. They want to talk to the possibilities of a 200-mile range, 200-mile-per-hour top speed, 200-kilogram hyper sport electric motorcycle. That was then. This is now lawsuits, investor battles, and a staff that's shrunk to a skeleton crew. Now, a huge problem facing Damon is emerging, and they are facing multiple legal claims. One involves Jay Giraud. He was Damon's co-founder and a former CEO, and he's suing the company and some of its employees too over what he calls an unfair ousting, and he's demanding separation pay bonuses and stock he claims is owed. Damon has denied all his allegations. Meanwhile, financier and investor Andrew DeFrancesco, he claims Damon failed to honor stock compensation tied to his advisory and investment role, and he's seeking redress to the tune of $3.2 million. Then there are claims of unpaid rent, sums owed to other creditors. Meanwhile, the company itself appeared to be attempting to make some efforts in the direction of marketing its software, which really appears to be something of a desperate attempt to salvage some intellectual property rights rather than the hardware, since it seems their manufacturing ambitions have evaporated with no functional factory. There's no evidence they have created anything that is production ready. That latest offering in the last show was a clay sculpting. Now, a company that's been taking deposits on machines for some years should be well beyond that stage of development. It turns out Damon now are down to just 13 employees, which includes 2 contractors, and that's a huge drop from the 100 plus the company once employed. Now, Damon say they have taken thousands of deposits. So what are the chances that Damon will ever be delivering those high performance electric superbikes? They seem slimmer than ever, frankly. And the knock-on effect of all this is, of course, an ever deeper erosion of consumer confidence in e-motorcycles generally. The sort of huge hype followed by huge failure is hardly what the e-moto industry needs right now. But if electric motorcycles remain a troubled pool of startups which have failed to deliver, there are significant problems in the ICE motorcycle industry too. And there are some indications of this because Suzuki have just announced some fairly significant price cuts. Several of their mid to large capacity bikes are now up to £1,000 cheaper than they were a few days ago. Now, back in January, Suzuki launched a 0% finance offer on a range of models that ran till the end of March. But the problem with these offers is they're attractive if you need to spread the payments, but they're not much use to anybody who actually has cash to burn. You may be able to negotiate a discount with the dealer, but it's actually nicer just to have a cheaper motorcycle. Maybe that is why Suzuki GB has just cut the on-the-road prices for several models. The touring-focused V-Strom 800DE and the GSX S1000 Naked. Those machines now carry tags of £9,999 and £10,999 respectively. Those are the on-road charges. They're both down £1,000. The GT Plus version of the GSX 1000, that's down to $12.99. That's another £1,000 off, and the GX Plus. God, these are awkward names, aren't they? So that's $14,999, and that's down £900. The V-Strom 800RE, that gets a more modest reduction of £200, and that's now $9,499. And even the Katana sees a small discount too. Now, Suzuki GP's head of motorcycles, Jonathan Martin, says this isn't a flash sale. He calls it a, quote, pricing realignment, making Suzuki bikes more transparent and more affordable without relying on short-term promotions. Now, pricing realignment is an interesting phrase, isn't it? Because what it suggests is that Suzuki realised that they simply were charging too much for these bikes. I said at the time of the launch of the new V-Stroms that they were several grand too pricey, something as emphasised definitely when the much more competitive Honda Hornet turned up. And I still think the current on-the-road price for the 2025 XL 750 Transalp at 10k is too high, but the Suzuki was priced even higher. So it may have been a result of Suzuki knowing that Honda were coming along with their own twins and expecting them to be higher priced. Now, I've seen very few of the DL800s on the roads. The L650 was everywhere. Overpricing leads to poor sales generally, and that leads to the sort of short-term promotional discounts, and they hurt dealer margins and ultimately confuse and annoy buyers too, I think. I don't think it's a coincidence that the British Motorcycle Market Report says that first half registrations in the year were down 17.1%, 51,186 to be precise, which is one of the weakest performances in 2 decades. But Suzuki specifically is amongst the brands with sharper drops still. The report lists Suzuki sales in that period as being down 29.2%. So are the cuts enough? Well, perhaps for the DL800, maybe not. Triumph's Tiger 660, that's gone up significantly since its launch, but it's still £8,995. And I'd say that's probably a more characterful machine than the DL800 too. And if you're prepared to go Chinese, of course, then there's QJ Motor, CF Moto. They're putting real pressure on the UK market. If you want the 700 MT, for example, that goes for as low as £6,499. That is a big chunk of fuel to put in your machine to ride around it on it. You can argue that Suzuki are aiming at the premium end of the market, but they don't have the same kind of cachet as Ducati and BMW. And I think, frankly, they need to rethink their values to give buyers a bit more bang for their buck with their 800 twins. Be interested to hear what anybody has to say if they have one of those machines. Right, okay, here is a bike that I suspect will do fairly well. Let's give you a zoom in look at the front end of it. This is the new Yamaha WR125R. And it's a machine that's returning to the UK market after an inexplicable 8-year gap. Now, 125 Yamaha trail bikes, all the way back to the old two-strokes, they've been incredibly successful machines ever since learners have been restricted to 125s. They feel physically big, and they're easy to ride, generally speaking. And the latest version is now getting a serious hit of technology, the same variable valve actuation setup, which is currently seen on the R125, the MT125, and the XSR125. So how does it work? Well, basically, the system has a pair of inlet cams. At low revs, the valves are controlled by a cam with mild lift, and that always provides good torque. But when the revs climb, then a solenoid is triggered, and that drives a little dowel, apparently, which engages the exhaust valve's rocker arm, which sits over a higher profile cam, the second cam, and this is what boosts the top end performance. Now, the bike still is limited to 11 kilowatts, but it also delivers 11 Newton meters of torque. May not sound much by superbike standards, of course, but it makes for a fairly peppy learner bike. Now, the bike gets a revised frame. It gets a conventional KYB forks up front supporting a 21-inch wheel. At the rear, there's an 18-inch connected to a preload adjustable monoshock from the same company. Wheels are fitted with Dunlop D605 tyres. It's got an 875mm seat height, which is pretty high, but generally speaking, when you sit on these machines, it doesn't feel quite as high as it actually is, because the seat is so narrow, and that drops your feet down a little bit further. And of course, the suspension usually compresses on these. Claim fuel economy, 113 mpg. The bike gets a dual lens LED headlights, smartphone connected LCD dash. Pricing to be announced, but the bike will be in dealers next year. Now, if you were with me for the last show, you may remember, that's the wrong picture, I think. Where's it gone? Well, all right, never mind. I introduced the new Honda CB650 to you. Start again. CB500SF Super 4. I was reading the logo. It's a machine with retro looks inspired by its 80s cousin. So what do you think this machine is? Well, it's not a Honda. Is it a copy of the Honda? Is it a homage to the original 80s style? I don't know. It is the ZX500. And it comes from a company called Zhangzhou. And it was actually announced last month, even before we had seen the Honda. Now, the bike appears to put out 74 horsepower, which isn't bad for a 504. And it comes with a curb weight, they say, of 386 pounds, which is actually a pretty modest 175 kilograms. Now, are we going to see this bike in the UK? Probably not. The news at the moment is it will be domestic only offering, and you might have guessed already where it's built. It's built in China. But it does actually create a bit of a puzzle. Look at the machine. It's got that classic 80s sort of Eurosport styling about it. Looks a bit like the CB400's Super 4. Looks a bit like those 750, 900 Eurosport models. But how many of those historic Hondas actually ever made it into China? Why create a replica then of a bike that few riders will ever have seen? I don't know the answer to that. If you have any ideas yourself, I'd be more than interested to hear them. Right, okay, so moving on rapidly, we are into the in-depth part of the show. Hopefully I can get, there we go, there's the, okay. Right, so the question I'm asking today is global retailing what killed off M&P? You'll remember M&P are the online retailer, which has apparently gone into receivership. Now, it's a pretty simple model. Countrywide online retailing kills off the high street retailer. We've seen high streets empty of shop after shop after shop, and it's all been blamed on people buying online. But then as people begin to get used to buying online, they start searching for cheaper prices. And so the next step, it's argued that global shipping is killing off retailers which are based in the UK and retailing online. So stretch your memories back, and if you remember far enough back, there were two competing big mail order parts suppliers in the 80s and 90s. There was M&P based in Wales. There was MPS, Motorcycle Parts Supply, I believe that stood for. They had their outlet in Devon. I used to pop in there fairly regularly when I was down that way. Now, these two organisations, they ran pretty much in parallel for years. They offered much the same product line. They did their business in the same way via the classifieds and the back pages of motorcycle magazines, and by distributing thick mail order catalogues. I regularly used to have copies of both for ordering up spare parts for my dispatch bikes. Now, they were a household name for UK riders in pre-internet days. And initially, in the early days of the internet, they both seemed to be doing okay, even if they were blamed for taking sales away from high street retailers. I can remember one of my local dealers, sort of bemoaning the fact that they couldn't get a chain supplied to them for the same price that what these people were selling them online. Anyway, Customers valued the convenience, the sort of broader choice, the frequently lower prices, and the delivery to the door of buying by email and later on, or by mail originally and later directly online. So, what happened to those two firms? Like, my recollection is a bit hazy here, and online searches didn't turn up anything particularly conclusive either. But I believe MPS were actually taken over in the early 2000s by M&P when they got into financial trouble. So that would have been the early internet days. It seems that they were finally dissolved at Companies House in 2017. So having removed one of their major rivals, M&P moved into retailing motorcycles too. But they themselves seemed to be on the cusp of new things when they were bought out by a group of investors earlier this year. But the new outfit collapsed last month. So what killed them off? Well, on the one hand, it's likely that it's been an incredibly tough time for retailers generally in the last 5 years or so, whether you're supplying parts or bikes. What COVID, the general economic downturn, and everything else that's going on. M&P, obviously, they must have invested fairly heavily in their showrooms, and that means all the associated ongoing costs of rent, staff, stock, at a time when it's become steadily more difficult to shift new machines. We saw the downturn in the figures just a moment ago. Used machine sales generally seem to have held up, but the implication is that people have less cash to spend. And whilst they may still need to buy staples like chains, tires, and pads, a significant part of the business of M&P was selling bits and pieces that nobody really needed. And I suspect that that market has been slowly shrinking away. And market research apparently suggests that it's likely to continue declining over the next few years. So poor economic conditions certainly a factor. But in my opinion, there's also been a history of profiteering on those parts. It's now backfired because overpricing on parts supply has become obvious, and it's likely driven a significant rise in direct ordering from China. So let's have a look at the sort of thing I'm talking about. This is the Nemo 2 chain oiler. It's simple enough. Just give you a zoom in view. You sort of turn the knurled lid, having filled it with oil first, of course. You screw the lid down, and as you screw it down, the compression of the air on top of the oil forces oil down the delivery pipe and hopefully onto your chain. Now, I'm pretty sure I first spotted this on the M&P site. It's certainly still available via the German parts supplier Louis Moto. Now, note the price, £95 when you add on the tax, the shipping to the tax inclusive price of, there you can see, £87.91. Or you can choose, if you want to order it direct from the manufacturer, from the people claiming to be the manufacturer, called Cobra. So are they actually the manufacturer? Well, obviously not, because here's the exact same item over on eBay. Exactly the same aluminium body, exactly the same distributing pipe and everything else that's required to fit the chain oiler to your motorcycle, and it's 25 quid, and it just comes up with a different name. And if you want to step further afield and find out where eBay suppliers get their stock from, look no further than AliExpress. So here's once again, the same item, and it's under a different name again. This one is called Dragon Raw, and it's under a tenner, delivered to the UK. So guess where I bought mine? And this is part of the problem for UK outlets. They've survived on cheap imports from China, I suspect, for quite a while. And like it or not, and many people don't, China is a major supplier of motorcycle components. These aren't always these sort of low-cost fake or even counterfeit brands that you will see talked about a lot. Many are simply items like this, which are manufactured inexpensively in China and then bumped up in price dramatically when you buy them in the UK. If you're buying something like a gear indicator or the chain oiler in this case, of course, from a shop in the UK, it's almost certainly been sourced from a Chinese distributor. Motorcycle forums, Reddit, they're full of examples of kit which is wildly overpriced via the retailers in the UK and can be ordered for a fraction of the price direct. Now, yes, rising overheads, they may have increased costs for UK sellers. There may be, sort of regulation and liability issues that UK sellers have to manage, which overseas suppliers may well slide past. And it's often said that aftermarket parts retailers work on single-digit margins, but when you see something available to be shipped direct in a sort of one-off package from China for a tenth of the price that you can buy the same item over the counter or via email from a UK supplier, it's hard to believe this story of thin margins. And the fact is, if suppliers can't provide a fast, safe, and reliable product, then I don't think they will survive. Customers do value service. They do value buying things in the UK from UK-based companies. But the bottom line is that we're seeing the same product here, and it is shipped 10 times cheaper direct from China than it is when you buy it direct, you think, from the UK supplier. What we see is the hit to the wallet more than anything else. Right, I'd be interested to know if you've got any comments on that particular story, if you found any parts which you think are spectacularly overpriced at UK outlets, if you've got anything from M&P and found it cheaper elsewhere, or, let me know. Be interested to hear. Anyway, that is pretty much it for today's show. Before I go, let me just give a quick shout out to last week's coffee supporters and subscribers. I would like to say thank you to James, Brian, who bought a copy of Mind Over Motorcycle to download, Kelvin, Hallam, Dave, Helen, Brian MacG, and Anonymous, of course. So thanks mightily for your support. Nick said he's bought a number of generic parts for the SV650 Suzuki for a fifth of the UK cost. Yeah, and unfortunately, I can absolutely believe that. So I do think that M&P are probably a victim of their own pricing. Right, okay, so that's pretty much it for today's show, and Nick just confirms that yes, he bought from that well-known Chinese retailer. So don't forget to, if you are out there on the bike today, do watch out for the weather. It's still a bit breezy around, and the further north and east you go, the breezier it will probably be. Thank you for looking in, whether you're live or whether you're on catch up. You've been watching Elevenses from me, Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. Make a date to join me for the next show on Wednesday for another roundup of news, views, and biking tips. And say, if you're out there on your bike, stay shiny side up, and then you will be able to join me.